right, good evening, East Hampton Town Board. We're live on Channel 22. We're streaming to YouTube. The phone lines are open. You may begin.
Thank you, Matthew. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the East Hampton Town Board meeting of Thursday, July 3rd, 2025. Cheryl, if you could please read the roll call.
Present. Present.
Present.
Present.
Present. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight we have a special guest. We have our town historian, Hugh King, who's going to kick us off. Welcome, Hugh.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. In our continuing, thank you for inviting all these people to hear me speak, by the way.
On a holiday weekend, no less.
Oh, I know. In our continuing saga of police chiefs, I want to talk about John Henry Doyle. John Henry Doyle, when he retired, he would completed a 40-year career in law enforcement. That included 1 year as a foot patrolman with the New York City Police Department, a 27-year tenure with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and 12 years as chief of the East Hampton Police Department. He said yesterday he took satisfaction in having achieved virtually all his goals he had enumerated in his interview with the Star in 1968. These included construction of a new town police headquarters, increasing by at least 10 the number of officers in the department, which then totaled 20, expanding the department's Marine Division and a more rigid in-service training requirements, modernizing and enlarging the force, finally having a new building constructed, and educating the community in modern-day uses of law enforcement. The chief said, "To observer, the East Hampton scene, it seemed as far constabulary duties are concerned, his first year was demanding. No sooner had been hired than a murder, the result of a lover's triangle, required his attention, and in October 1968, 4 men at gunpoint stole $23,000 from the First National Bank in East Hampton. The department has almost doubled in size since his arrival, and its budget is over $1 million. Okay, now, speaking of breaking the law, let's talk about prohibition. What did prohibition have to do with women's suffrage? What did prohibition have to do with the federal income tax or the direct election of U.S. senators? What did prohibition have to do with Milton Miller and Clancy Pitts? What did prohibition have to do with Third House in Montauk? What did prohibition have to do with the Georgia Coast Guard Station? What did prohibition have to do with the fish factory in Promised Land? And what did prohibition have to do with a house on Fairview Avenue? Well, to answer to all those questions, you go to the Fisher House in Montauk. They have a wonderful exhibit on prohibition, okay? And next year, at this time, we're going to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The town crier will be here to read the Declaration, and he'll try to do it within 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. So tonight we have 8 public hearings. The first is the Peconic Land Trust acquisition of a conservation easement and to amend the 2025 Management Stewardship Plan. Our second public hearing is the acquisition of 43 Mile Hill Road. Next up, we're amending Town Code Chapter 255-141E, Personal Wireless Facilities Tier 1. And the fourth public hearing is the Northwest Fire Protection and Town of East Hampton Water Supply and Fire Protection District Agreement for 2026 and 2027. Then we have 4 public hearings that all have to do with amending the UR map. The first one is for 9 Royal Street. The next is for 120 Harbor Boulevard, then 19th Street in Springs, and 9 Eau Claire Street in Springs. That'll be followed by public portion and resolutions. And we ask when you come to the podium, make sure you're speaking into the mic. Say your name so the clerk can get it, and we ask you to kindly keep your comments to 3 minutes. So I have a list of folks that have signed up. We're going to go through the list, and then I'll ask for a show of hands for anyone else that wants to speak on the public hearing. So the first is the acquisition.
She's got to read it in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I was just going to say the first is the acquisition of 41 and 47 Coal Hollow Farm Road. Cheryl, if you could read the meeting notices, please.
public hearings will be held live and in person at the town board and will be available electronically by video and teleconferencing, and will be televised on local TV, LTV, Channel 22, and available for live stream on the LTV website. The public shall be permitted to appear in person, but may also provide comments on the matter being heard by calling 351-888-6331. Any person or party wishing to be heard with respect to the foregoing may do so in person or by agent or by attorney, by teleconference to the live meeting, or by written comment addressed to the East Hampton Town Clerk, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, New York, 11937. Comments may also be submitted to the Town Clerk by email to cbrennan@ehamptonny.gov. All comments must be received by the town clerk by the date and time of the hearing. Please check the meeting agenda posted on the town's website for any changes and for any updated information. Take notice, the town board of the town of East Hampton will hold a public hearing in the town board meeting room, East Hampton Town Hall, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, New York, pursuant to 247 of the General Municipal Code and 64E8 of the Town Law of the State of New York on July 3rd, 2025 at 6 p.m. or as soon after, that is, the matter may be heard, to consider the following. A, the town's acquisition of a conservation easement for the preservation of open space and the improvement of water quality with community preservation funds of a property located at 41 and 47 Cove Hollow Farm Road, East Hampton Village, from Peconic Land Trust. Presently, a contract vendee at the time of their acquisition of fee title ownership and consisting of approximately 5.5 acres of vacant land at the cost to the town of East Hampton not to exceed $20 million, plus reasonable survey title, prorated tax and recording charges, and said property being described on the Suffolk County tax map as 301-12-10-3 and 2. B, an amendment to the 2025 CPF Management and Stewardship Plan to include said property.
Thank you, Cheryl. And now we have Scott Wilson from our Land Acquisition and Management Director to introduce the property.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So the properties we're talking about, if you look on that area, are all outlined in blue. You can see just to the south of those are 2 in yellow and 3 in green that are either owned or managed, or owned and or managed by Peconic Land Trust. And these waterfront properties are located on Georgia Cove, part of the Georgia Capon watershed. The property is currently a grassland meadow sloping from a height of 15 feet at the western edge, sloping down to the cove. The property contains tidal wetlands that are significant for coastal wetland habitat, flood control, and the protection of surface water quality. While all of Georgia Capon has some limited tidal flushing, this cove is vulnerable to accumulations of pollutants, which impair the surface water quality. The parcel is within the coastal fish and wildlife habitat, a part of a scenic area statewide significance. It is also recommended on the Critical Lands Protection Strategy and is a water protection district. Preserving this grassland and the prevention of clearing and septic will help limit the flow of chemical and natural contaminants into the compromised Georgia Capon. The primary purpose under consideration for this property is the preservation of open space and water quality by purchasing a conservation easement from Peconic Land Trust. The easement will also allow for a trail and up to 50 feet in width of off-street parking, similar to the attached rendered map by Peconic Land Trust, which I will also put in. We have received a number of letters of support, as well as one from the mayor of East Hampton Village requesting preservation of its property. I imagine there's quite a few people in this room that might want to say some nice things about that, including Mr. Cantwell, I hope. I believe John Halsey and Matt Swain from Peconic Land Trust are also here, as well as Kim Cordy from Friends of Georgia Capon Foundation. So they're going to speak more eloquently than myself, so I'd like to turn it over to them to say a few nice things.
Terrific. Thanks, Scott. Do you want to join us up there at the podium, John?
So I'm John V.H. Halsey, president of the Peconic Land Trust. It's It's been a long time coming to be before you this evening, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about this acquisition. I also want to thank the town trustees, who are the owners of the bottom of Georgica Cove and Georgica Pond. They have a keen interest in this acquisition and have expressed their support. And a shout out to Kim Cordy, who used to work with the trust and was very involved in this project before becoming the new executive director of the Friends of Georgica Pond Foundation. And of course, Sarah Davison. I want to shout out to her and the chair of the board. We have Larry Cantwell. So yes, this is a great opportunity. I just want to say that the town and the village's acquisition of this easement is really a cornerstone of this project. It has enabled the trust to bring $35 million in private funds to the table. And I think it's fair to say that if we didn't bring that, there would be no acquisition and protection of these properties. Just a minute, I want to spend on the power and importance of public-private partnerships. We have a long history with the town, back to the origins of the trust. I'm just going to mention a few key projects in the 2000s to remind us that bringing private funds to the table can do so much in our joint efforts to protect what we know and love here. 2002, Mark Buick dealership. That was a property that was really threatened. I know it was sought after by the village for years. The opportunity presented itself, but there was no ready money. So the trust, with the help of the mayor, former mayor at the time, Paul Rickenbach, who was here this evening, we found a donor, a lender, who lent us the money to pick up that property. And then we held it until the town was able to purchase it. 2006, something that Scott Wilson will remember, because at that point he was working for the trust. The Babinski and Conklin conservation easement purchases on the farmland there, we negotiated a bargain sale. We ended up, the trust, putting in about a third of the funds for that acquisition. As a consequence, the trust and the town co-hold those easements, which means we also share the responsibility of monitoring and enforcing those restrictions. So it's another aspect of this public-private partnership. 2014, we had the Weigley easement purchase. And by now, Scott was working for the town, so he viewed it from the other side. Very similar to Babinski and the Conklin acquisitions, trust raised about a third of the private funds, and again, we co-hold that easement. 2022, Jones Creek Preserve. This was a 50-50 partnership with the town. The trust brought half of the money, 50% of the money for that acquisition, thanks to the Shelby Cullum Davis Charitable Fund. So that was a 50-50 deal, and we are joint owners of that property. So in today's transaction, the private funds that we're bringing to the table represent about 64% of the project cost. The easement appraises at over $46 million in value. So the town's purchase is a really big bargain sale at 20. And because this land consists of two fully developable lots, if developed, there could be about 26,000 square feet of residential structures on those two lots. We can't let that happen. So I ask us all to consider the importance of this transaction, and I would like to have Matt Swain, who's Vice President of Conservation Programs at the Trust, to talk about the conservation values.
Great, thank you, John. Welcome, Matt.
Hello. Thank you for having me. These 5.5 acres meet so many conservation criteria. They assist with water quality improvement, scenic vistas, grassland habitat, as well as public access, as described in the public hearing resolution. But one of the more significant things also is the wildlife habitat, especially for birds. And I brought in a photo that was taken on the shoreline. This is several dozen great blue heron, a very unusual concentration. And a neighbor next to the pond took this, so I just wanted to.
Yeah, that's something.
So our work here dates back several decades, with the first being the preservation of the adjacent 2 lots, which are 5.5 acres, and later 3 lots totaling 8 acres. The trust has been managing this area as a single contiguous grassland, one ecological management unit. We're very excited to add these 2 parcels to that assemblage, creating a nearly 20-acre grassland on Long Island, and it's particularly rare in this area. It's almost found nowhere. And as previously stated, we'll be installing like a loop trail and also some limited parking areas. And I just want to thank the town, the village, and all of the donors for their support.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so now I'm going to go down the list of folks that have signed up. Next up is Bruce Horwith. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak before you on behalf of this acquisition. I'm going to really put on just conservation biologist hat. As a member of the public, I've always loved these places, and I'm really excited about the idea that they're going to be protected forever. But I started working with the Conic Land Trust as a consultant about 5 years ago on these properties. And when we started, we developed, and we've now been implementing a management plan for the 4 parcels that Matt mentioned. But we really have been operating on trying always to envision this whole area as one unit, meaning all the way from Chauncey Close, it's about 1/3 of a mile of shoreline, on up to the last piece before it becomes residential again to the north. In total, close to 20 acres, as Matt suggested. And the significance of the 20 acres, I try to provide just a little context. Even small yard-sized patches of grassland and other natural vegetation are beneficial, but they're islands of nature within an otherwise unsupportive landscape of development. And these islands provide habitat for some threatened animals like box turtle, or native plants like milkweed, a plant that's required for monarch butterflies if the monarchs are going to continue to exist. But simply put, more is better, particularly in regard to grasslands. Close to 90% of the tall grass prairie, which is the type of grassland that formerly occupied so much of the eastern part of the United States, has been lost. This has led to a parallel declines in numerous animal species, especially grassland-dependent birds. And this is where the size of the grassland is particularly significant. While each bird species does have its own specific requirements, 20 acres seems to be about a minimum size for a grassland to function ecologically for many of these species, according to the Audubon Society, New York State, DEC, others that are involved in grassland management. And so there's a lot more I could say about grassland, but luckily for you, I'm not going to. I'd like to enter into the minutes some notes from a podcast I did with Change Hampton that gives a little bit more background about the importance and scarcity of grasslands. And I'd also like to enter into the record letters that were sent to me and also to the town, but I don't know how quickly they got it, if they made it to the town this afternoon. And these are letters in support as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
You could give that to the clerk. Thanks, Bruce. Okay, next up is Stephen Schwartz. Welcome, Stephen.
Hello. I'm Stephen Schwartz, and I am a resident of Ruxton Road, an adjoining street to Cove Hollow Farm. Drive past the property in question every day. I've been there for 31 years. I am the co-founder of the East Hampton Group for Good Government and know many of you in that capacity. I haven't had to be here much because I haven't had any complaints to deal with.
We like it that way, Stephen.
Which is a nice thing. I'm not complaining. But perhaps most importantly, I'm here as one of the successors of Bill Heppenheimer, who did the Cove Hollow Farm subdivision and imposed restrictive covenants on the scale of development, the style of development, and historical allusions in the development. allusions, not illusions. And what do? We try to make sure that materials are used that are consistent with East Hampton from the 1930s. What that may be cedar shingle roofs, tile slate roofs, unlikely, but slate roofs, and comparable materials and colors. So what's the significance of that here? Well, the significance is that preservation, you've already heard from people far more qualified than I am about the environmental impact. But I can speak about the historical impact. This is farmland, and it's been farmland, never was anything else. And you have the opportunity to make sure that it stays that way. And you know, there was a survey done by the town about 15 years ago, and extensively publicized, and thousands of people answered that survey. It was many pages. And one of the most important things that people noted that they wanted to see was the preservation of vistas with long view channels. And that's exactly what this is. So for people like me who are not scientists, but have eyesight, thank God, we can enjoy those vistas, and you have the chance to preserve that. And so I speak most enthusiastically and hope that you will do what you can to preserve this property. I'm honored to be able to speak here. It's a great part of being part of a free country, but to be associated with people like John Halsey is really a privilege. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Kimberly Cordy. Welcome, Kim.
Evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Again, I'm Kim Cordy with the Friends of Georgia Pond, and I'm here to ask for your support of resolution number 32968 to acquire and permanently preserve the approximately 5.5 acres at 41 and 47 Cove Hollow Farm Road in the village of East Hampton. These parcels are not simply pieces of land. They are significant, undisturbed open spaces that lie directly adjacent to a block of protected land along the north shore of Georgica Cove. And as you know, Georgica Cove has faced persistent water quality challenges for years, due largely to nitrogen loading from residential septic systems, lawn fertilizers, and stormwater runoff. Preserving these parcels would prevent additional nitrogen from entering the cove, an essential step towards improving and protecting its long-term health. But beyond water quality, this acquisition would safeguard vital open space. It would protect natural habitats and preserve the scenic and ecological integrity of the whole Georgica Pond watershed. Equally important, this is another example of the town's strong commitment to partnerships with organizations such as Peconic Land Trust. And in this case, the trust is contributing the majority of the funds, allowing the town's dollars to go even farther and towards other projects. Under this resolution, the town would purchase a conservation easement to protect these parcels in perpetuity at a remarkable bargain sale. Like John mentioned, the easement's appraised value is more than twice what the town will pay. It's a rare opportunity and a fiscally responsible investment in the future of East Hampton. In closing, I just want to thank everyone whose dedication and vision have brought us to where we are today. Your commitment has made all the difference. So let's take this opportunity to complete what we've begun and ensure that these lands remain wild, open, and protected, not just for today, but for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Next up, and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with the last name, Matthew Neal.
You're close enough, Mallow.
Okay.
I think you're having more trouble with my handwriting.
That's what it is. Welcome, Matthew.
More trouble with my handwriting and my name, but thank you very much for the opportunity to address the board. I won't belabor the arguments that John and Matt and Kim have already given you, although I agree completely with all of those. But I live at 40 La Forest Lane, which is directly across the pond from Neil Blumenthal's house, Alfred Ross's property, and then down the pond from the subject properties that are here. When we arrived at our property, there were 250 feet of Phragmites. We removed them, but more importantly for tonight's purposes, we installed a buffer from anywhere from 40 to 100 feet of plantings in accordance with agreements with the DEC and this board and the town trustees of Georgia Pond. So we know the benefits of protecting the water quality, and we know the benefits because we've seen those blue herons. We've seen a bald eagle yesterday, literally. We've seen swans nest on our property, and all of that is also going to take place across the pond on the two Ross properties. Additionally, we support, and no one's talked about this, but we support the public access to Georgia Cove as it exists at the north end of the cove, and we see paddle boarders, and we see kayakers, and we see occasional scullers who come to launch their craft there and go by our house. And we applaud that and are thrilled. We also applaud and think it's an appropriate balance, the proposal for the Ross properties for public access with a trail and some limited parking, which will enable people, particularly birders, frankly, who might want to come and enjoy that property. So we're very much supportive of that. I also do want to mention that the public-private partnership is, I think, not an unimportant aspect of this, for sure, because it does leverage the public funds, and it makes them go so much further. So with that, I will, the one thing that nobody's mentioned, and I think we ought to mention it, is Georgia Cove is in the village, not the town. And so it's a perfectly reasonable thing for people to ask. People have asked this to me, frankly. Why should the town support what's a village project? Now, obviously, you've done that before, and you also worked in partnership with the village on many occasions. But it's clear that although Georgia Cove and Georgia Pond are in the village, in fact, since they're the drainage for a watershed of 50 square miles, way beyond just the village of East Hampton, there is a legitimate purpose from the town's point of view of protecting, doing whatever it can to protect the water quality of the pond and the cove indeed. So with that, I will sit down and say thank you. I hope you will support it, and I urge the approval of the resolution.
Thank you, Matthew. Next up is Rick Whalen.
Testing.
Good evening, Rick.
Good evening, Madam Supervisor, members of the town board. My name is Richard Whalen, Whalen Fowler PLLC. I represent one of the donors to the proposed acquisition of these easements. Cove Hollow Farm, as the property was always known, one of the most historic and beautiful farms in the history of East Hampton. From the early 1800s, at least the early 1800s until the 1940s, it was associated with the Georgia branch of the Talmadge family. You all know who the Talmadges are. It was the last active dairy farm in East Hampton town. It operated until 1977, had as many as 110 cows. The last man to actually run the farm, Dick Leland, still lives in this town. I interviewed him. He actually took me around and showed me all the old buildings a few years ago and told me what they all were. Many of them are still there, although in many cases converted to residential purposes. In 1978, there was a bitter battle fought over the subdivision of this property. The Group for America South Fork was a young environmental organization. They tried to get the village planning board and the owner to accept a clustered subdivision plan that would have preserved 26 acres of land along Georgia Cove, basically in the area that we're talking about today. They failed. The owner of the village planning board was interested, and the property was cut up into a grid-style subdivision. One of the people around in those days, Russell Stein, was assistant director for the Group for America South Fork in 1978. I talked to him last week. He said in that era, there were two losses, there were two things that really stung the Group for America South Fork. One of them was the Four Dune subdivision in the Wickapog area of Southampton, arguably the worst subdivision ever approved in the history of the South Fork. And the other one was here, Cove Hollow Farm. So in 1978, Cove Hollow Farm was subdivided, grid-style lots, no reserved area. It was destroyed, except it wasn't. Miraculously, you still have much of the land the group was seeking to preserve in 1978 is still intact along Georgia Cove. So you have an opportunity to rewrite history, to salvage a good part of the historic Cove Hollow Farm. Obviously, I think it's an opportunity that you should not miss. What could happen to these lots if they were built on, if they're not preserved? They're about 5.5 acres total. One lot is 2.8 acres, the other one's 2.7 acres. Under the village code right now, which is more liberal than the town's regulations, you could build 26,000 square feet of GFA, 13,200 square feet of GFA on the larger lot, 12,700 square feet on the other lot. I ran the numbers based on the lot sizes. Also, these lots will be completely lawn. They're already cleared. The subdivision approval included a scenic easement along the shoreline. It's only 60 feet deep along the shore. The properties themselves are 410 to 420 feet deep. As long as somebody builds on that lot at least 150 feet landward of the wetlands, not hard to do, they need nothing but a building permit. You don't need a village wetlands permit if you're 150 feet from the wetlands, and none of the property will require a DC tidal wetlands permit because everything is above the 10-foot contour line. So I know there've been questions about public, access, and I know there is a limited public access proposed. This should be viewed as akin to a farmland development rights purchase. You don't buy farmland development rights and get access with it. You're preserving views, you're preserving habitat, you're preserving rural character. And just last thing, in terms of public access, 1,600 feet northeast of this property, and I measured the distance on the county GIS, is the end of Cove Hollow Road. What's at the end of Cove Hollow Road? Well, it's a short, village-owned, paved road, cul-de-sac, no houses on it. At the end of the road is a put-in for kayaks and paddleboards. I went down there this week to check. It's completely open. You can launch a kayak at the end of Cove Hollow Road. There are no parking restrictions. So physical access to the cove exists right now. And hopefully in the future, people paddling south into Georgia Cove from that launch point will be able to look on their right, and for 1,800 linear feet, they'll have natural shoreline, no houses. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Next up is Lynn Sharp. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thanks to all of you who have really done the homework and understand what this means to those of us who live there. I live on Ruxton Road. I believe my late husband and I, were the first people to build on what had been the dairy farm. And what attracted us then and still does was the openness, and the fact that there were places where you could see the water, and the fact that because of the covenants running with the land, you could not build a house on every single inch of the property that you bought. It's open, it's spacious, it's free feeling, and it was a very special place then. It's a very special place now. I don't believe you can stop progress, but you can certainly control it. And everything that's been talked about today is the perfect way to control it. I support wholeheartedly the efforts to preserve this land. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, that's everyone that I have signed up. So now I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Jim?
Hey, Jen, good to see you.
Welcome, Jim.
Hi, guys. Sorry I'm a little late. I'd hoped to get here earlier, but it is 4th of July weekend. Listen, Jim Grimes, I'm from the East Hampton Town Trustees. We earlier have provided a letter of support for the purchase of this property. I'm here to kind of reiterate that support, okay? The question becomes sometimes when you look at a piece of land like this, okay, you've got a subdivision, you've got a 60-foot buffer that's written into this subdivision. Why should the town buy it? Okay, should the town buy it so some rich people across the cove can continue to look at this vacant land? Yeah, you could. But you know what? Trustees have owned Georgia Pond for, I guess, since 1686. But the bigger question here becomes, I think going back to 1964 when Rachel Carlson wrote Silent Spring. What does it have to do with this? Not a freaking thing, except it woke the politicians of this country up to the value of open space, the value of saving some of these areas. And even though this is kind of tiny and maybe you could consider insignificant, it really isn't. It's contiguous with some Peconic Land Trust property. There's very few pieces of property left on Georgia Pond that are in public ownership. This, fortunately for us, the Ross family has been good stewards to this land for the duration of their ownership. This is an opportunity for the town, I want to say, to continue Rachel Carlson's talk about the Wilderness Act of 1964, to continue that legacy. So I urge the town to purchase this property in the framework that they're looking forward to. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, please.
Mike Hansen.
Oh, Michael, I didn't realize you were,
It's running up here.
sorry.
My name is Michael Hansen. I live in Wainscott. I live near the pond, not on the pond. I'm not in that bracket. What Mr. Halsey said, or Mr. Whalen said, is the most chilling part of this whole situation, is that acquiring this land means 26,000 square feet of GFA will not be built. That's huge. So I support your endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
You could probably take the microphone down since Michael's so tall.
My name is Julia Murphy. First of all, I want to thank the town board for all of the work you do toward maintaining East Hampton in lawfulness, fairness, justice, and inclusivity. I've come here tonight to speak in favor of the town using public funds to acquire and thereby protect this 5.3 acre parcel on Georgia Cove, which is in question. I've lived for a good part of my life and still live full-time at 15 Georgia Association Road in Wainscott on the pond. My mother traded her engagement ring for our house in 1965, and I spent my childhood in the pond, catching eels, being dissuaded from tormenting the swans, and trailing my feet off the back of a rowboat. As we all know, and so many people have spoken so eloquently about, the ecosystem has been very significantly degraded in these last decades. And now in August, it is necessary to not touch the water in the pond and to tell people not to let their dogs anywhere near it, let alone being able to swim in it. After kayaking, it's necessary to wash everything very thoroughly when the toxic blue-green algae is blooming, as it does for a few weeks every summer. The crabs are contaminated. It truly is very sad to be witnessing this transformation from beautiful nature into a toxic body of water. Thankfully, great efforts are being made by our community to turn the situation around. Many of us living in the watershed are investing in nitrogen-reducing septic systems, limiting the use of fertilizers and chemicals, and the Friends of Georgia Pond Foundation is heading up valiant efforts to heal and monitor the pond. As we know, if the town elects to contribute to the acquisition of this 5.3 acre parcel, it would bring the total of the protected lands there to over 18 acres, the majority of these acres having been privately conserved through the efforts of the Peconic Land Trust without public funds. Saving this parcel will thereby preclude the building of at least 2 additional mansions on the shoreline with their attendant septic impact, landscaping, runoff, etc. It is important to emphasize that the pond is there for the whole community to enjoy. There are thousands of kayakers, beachcombers, and bird watchers who explore this magnificent, fragile landscape every year. I understand that this new parcel will also include trails for hiking. With so many new houses going up everywhere and on the shores of the pond, I think this is an important and worthwhile step towards stemming development and protecting precious natural resources. It's important to think of future generations and what they will find here in our wake. As we all know, the East End is certainly among the most beautiful landscapes in the world, and it is our job to protect it while it is under our watch. Thank you very much for being able to speak.
Thank you, Julia. David? Welcome, David.
Thank you. I hate to be a party pooper, but there always has to be one naysayer in the crowd. Interestingly,
Just state your name for the record.
David Buddha from the Springs.
Thank you.
Interestingly, Councilmember Lease opposed the scheduling of this public hearing, and I'll be very interested to hear his thoughts on this matter, since I believe he is still the longtime liaison to the CPF Advisory Board. There were several problems here. First of all, if the Peconic Land Trust had the ability to acquire this property for the original asking price was $65 million, it's now a bargain at $55 million. If it acquired it entirely with public PLT funds, we wouldn't be involved. If the village had not asked the town to disregard the terms of the intermunicipal agreement that limits how much money can be spent or requires the town to spend certain funds for acquisitions in the village, then I wouldn't have an objection. But the village, and I've looked at the resolution they adopted in December 18th, 2024, it doesn't say anything about why they're asking you to disregard your intermunicipal agreement and to kick in town CPF funds above and beyond what you're required to spend for acquisitions in the village. The Public Land Trust has owned 59 and 53 Cove Hollow Road since at least 1984 through a predecessor entity, Public Trust for Public Land. And then you have these two parcels, but there's yet a third one just immediately to the north that's also owned by the Ross family interests that has not even been mentioned. It's another 2.6 acre parcel, similarly situated, and I very much expect someone to be coming out and asking for another $20 million for that parcel. No one should be acquiring these two without dealing with the next one up the road or up the pond, cove, if you will. Arthur Ross was a noted philanthropist who died in 2007. His sons and widow own a bevy of properties. In fact, they own the two properties directly across from this property and across the cove on the other side. Ordinarily, when the Public Land Trust gets involved and solicits contributions, who's going to pay? The people who are going to benefit indirectly by enhancing the value of their own property. They're the first ones who are going to pay money. And that they get a write-off. They get a federal tax deduction for contributing to the nonprofit, but yet they're really enhancing their own property. Who's paying the $35 million? Don't know. They won't tell us. I've asked. No one seems to know. I've also asked for a copy of the proposed conservation easement that the town is going to pay $20 million for. I didn't get it. It doesn't exist. All I got was a copy of a 1978 scenic easement agreement, which Rick mentioned the distance. It's a very small scenic easement along the strip of the Cove waterland. And that's it. There is no recitation of exactly what public access, public participation. We're certainly not restoring this historic farm to active farming, which is another appropriate use of town CPF funds. So there's really a poorly explained purpose for this, no explanation for why the town should pay above and beyond its share of CPF funds, beyond what it has an agreement to pay for village acquisitions. Who's going to manage this? What's going to happen on that property? None of those documents exist yet. Who's paying the $35 million? Don't know. The people who seem to be benefiting the most are the Ross family interests who own the surrounding properties. Perhaps they're giving in one hand and taking in the other hand, and maybe that's what is driving this entire transaction. I don't know because no one will tell me. But I strongly suggest that you need to deal with the next adjacent property, also owned by the Ross family interests, immediately to the north up the cove, because to deal with these two properties and not deal with the next one is really short-sighted. One last thing. You've heard it from various people. These lands are protected by, obviously, wetlands, 150-foot setback. There is a small scenic easement. There are very restrictive covenants and CNRs that were imposed back in 78 and 82 when the two sections of the Cove Hollow Farm subdivisions were adopted. Obviously, the village, I don't know the village codes that well, but the possibility of two very nice homes with modern septic systems on this property does not upset me. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Larry?
Welcome, Larry.
Pleasure to be here once again. My name is Larry Cantwell, and I'm the president of the George Capon Foundation. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the George Capon Foundation, the creation of it. And over that 10-year period, there's been a terrific partnership between the foundation, the town board, the village board, the town trustees, the Suffolk County, and others. And a lot of pieces of the puzzle are coming together in terms of improving the water quality of George Capon. And it's been a long and complicated effort. But because of the partnership that we have, it is showing results and it is being successful. And I look forward to many more years of continuing that partnership and continuing to improve the water quality in George Capon and preserving the natural surroundings of George Capon. I'm here obviously to support the acquisition, but when the agreement between the town and the village was negotiated for the use of the CPF funds, at the time the CPF program, actually prior to the adoption by the state of the CPF program, I was the village administrator and I was intimately involved in the negotiation of that agreement. And the intent of that agreement was to ensure that the village would receive at least 10% of the total CPF funds collected by the town. In fact, the village contributes more than 10% of the total CPF funds on an annual basis, because if you think of the value, and tonight we understand the real estate values in the village of East Hampton, the amount of taxes raised from the CPF tax is more than 10% of the total that is received by the town of East Hampton. And that agreement was reached in order to ensure that at least 10% of the total would be spent in the village, since village properties were contributing more than 10% of the total of the CPF funds. In addition, that agreement provides for up to 20% of the total to be spent in the village of East Hampton, should the village of East Hampton contribute any of their own funds. So I've never viewed the 10% agreement as an agreement for a minimum contribution. I've always agreed it a maximum contribution. I've always considered it to be a minimum contribution. And there's I think to continue the working relationship between the foundation, the trustees, the village, and others, that this is a very worthwhile acquisition, and I completely support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Your Honor, come up, please. Welcome, Paul.
Well, good evening, Madam Supervisor and Town Board members. It's like a step back in time. I thought my days of approaching a municipal body were over, but I'm very happy to be here tonight regarding this proposed venture. Let me just step back in time a little bit. You heard early on that John Halsey and the Land Trust got involved when we made our first acquisition. CPF, and Larry was there, we were there together, had just become law of the land on the 5 East End towns. And I wanted to elk out, and we did. We got this agreement with the town of East Hampton, town and village. At the time, I don't know if that's changed. We were the only village within a township that had codified a written agreement that a certain amount of monies would go to the village of East Hampton. And as Larry indicated, I don't know the numbers to be specific, but the village of East Hampton is maybe 30%, 33% of the assessed valuation of the town of East Hampton. I'm sure that number's changed. But being said, the opportunity became available where we were able to purchase the former Mark R. Buick property. I had worked out an arrangement with the then owner of the property, working with Larry and village attorney. The only thing is, we had 30 days to come up with the money, and we didn't have it. And that's when John and the land trust became involved. The village was able to secure a private donor that gave us the amount of money that was needed, which was, I believe, 3.2 million. And he wanted the money back in 30 days. That's when John came into the exercise, and that's when I first met John. And I can only tell you, he's a beautiful soul, consummate human being, and cares very deeply about our environment. I'm happy to say that that deal came to fruition. That was the first purchase with CPF money in the village. And over the last number of years, I know that there's been parcels that maybe have been discussed. I'm not sure, certain they came to fruition. The bottom line is, I'm here tonight to support this. A little bit of background. When Chauncey Farm was there and they had dairy cows, I used to take my daughters up there to watch them milk the cows at night. That's how evolution has taken place. And it's so nice to see that in perpetuity, that land, to the extent available, is being left in its original state. These parcels are available, and I would only underscore, and I would answer a question from the previous speaker. If indeed this becomes a reality, the town will hold the land, the village is a partner, the land trust will be the steward of the property. That's a trifecta as far as I'm concerned, and I think it would be a feather in the cap of the village, the town, and again, the land trust. So thank you, and what can I say? I just would add one comment, not germane. Congratulations on the roundabout. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Would anyone else like to address the board? Is there anyone else in the room that would like to address the board? No? Okay, Matthew, is there anyone on the line for this public hearing?
We have no callers on the line.
Motion to close?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Cheryl, if you could read the second meeting notice, please. Why don't we give it a minute if folks are going to be leaving the room? We're going to just pause the meeting for a minute so you folks can, thank you for coming. Okay, Cheryl, why don't you get started with the second meeting notice, please?
Take notice that will hold a public hearing in the Town Board Meeting Room, East Hampton Town Hall, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, New York, pursuant to 247 of the General Municipality Code and 64E8 of the Town Law of the State of New York on July 3rd, 2025 at 6 p.m. or as soon after, that is, the matter may be heard to consider the following: the town acquisition of the preserve of open space, recreation areas, and the improvement of water quality with community preservation funds for a property located at 43 Mile Hill Road, East Hampton, reputedly owned by 43 Mile Hill LLC and consisting of approximately 9.35 acres of vacant land at a cost to the town of East Hampton not to exceed $16 million plus reasonable survey title, prorated tax and recording charges, said property being described on the Suffolk County tax map as 300-72-1-2, an amendment to the 2025 CPF Management and Stewardship Plan to include said property.
Thank you, Cheryl. So we have a number of folks signed up for this public hearing. First up is Larry Konslik. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you. Hello.
Larry Konslick, my wife and I, Gay, decided we wanted to speak out in favor of this proposal, and so we formed, you might say, formed this. We call it the High Barbary Alliance, and we have in a short time we have close to 40 people who have indicated their support of our position platform, and I'll hand you this position. The clerk, this position platform at the end of what comments I make, but my wife will actually read it into the record after me. I'm here to basically kind of give an outline, layout of the land, since I probably know it as well as almost anybody does. My family bought out there with the Whelans in 1948. My mother and father, and Dwayne Whelan, who was a town attorney, and his wife, Mary Whelan, purchased 40 acres of it was actually the back 40 acres of Phoebe Scoy's farm. Now, Phoebe Scoy was a very industrious woman who actually made a go of it in the 1800s without electricity, running water. I mean, I imagine she had wells, and actually became a productive farm or a sustenance type of farm. And then my parents, we also actually lived off the land. We didn't have electricity till I was 12. We had cows, steer, pigs. I milked the cows, and I still have 5 acres of that. And but I wanted to. So so I was born in 1951, and in about middle 1950s, my cousin Peter and I were walking up the beach on Mile Hill Road, and we saw a man in a stream, and he had a shovel, and he was digging into the stream. It was a tidal stream that we was familiar with, and he was his name was Ernie Comiati, and he was starting the beginnings of a marina. His dream was to make a marina there. So he had a shovel, and I guess he was just trying to check out what the tide was doing with that stream and plans for the future. I remember not liking that when I saw it, but I was just a little boy, of course. But anyway, but he's a very nice man. And his plans, he followed through with his plans to the best he could. What happened, though, is that when Northwest Harbor changed, because they moved the creek channel to the creek, to Northwest Creek, used to be on the wharf side. And then they added a dredge came in probably in the early 1960s and dredged a new channel on the Barcelona side. And so the old channel was closed off. And resultingly, Ernie's plans were really not quite dashed, but they were hindered to quite an extent, because now larger boats would not be able to come into his marina. So ultimately what he did is he dredged the inlet larger, and he made his first basin. He used a crane, and my cousin David Wheeler, I remember, helped him with that, and he made a basin. And he made, I remember, 7 little boats, because he wanted to do what Howard Overton had done in the creek and rent out small boats. And that was not successful for Ernie, probably because the inlet was not deep enough. And then later on, Ernie, the A&P on Newtown Lane was being demolished, and he managed to get all of that concrete and the bricks, and he trucked them in, and he made a jetty, out to the bay. And I think he put the jetty on the wrong side, because he had a hard time keeping that marina, that inlet, deep enough. Although in the late 1970s, before I went to law school, after college pro law school, I became a bay scholopper for 3 years. I rebuilt a 28-foot boat with a local fisherman who was a boat builder. And I loved it. I loved doing that, but you couldn't make enough money doing it. It was a part-time job. But in those days, there were scallops. Anyway, but I could get that boat through there. It was deep enough at that time. Well, sadly, I guess you might say sadly, I think me and Howard Overton, who had ultimately retired and sold his little place in Northwest Creek, were Ernie's only customers, and I paid him, I think, $30 a month. So Ernie became a mailman. A lot of you might have known him. And he called himself Lovable Ernie. But anyway, but that marina, Ernie passed away in the early 1990s, and that inlet closed up. And right now, I went and looked at it just the other day. My neighbor, Brian Demain, I told Brian, I said,
mentioned something about the marina being navigable waters, entitled. He said, you can't get into that basin anymore. So I went down and looked, and sure enough, the entire inlet is closed off now. And I think that's why the survey calls it ponds. And now the problem that I see is, now we're in favor of this purchase, but I do see some issues because those ponds now are, it's just like in the Wainscott Pond where they call it impaired water, and they're not being flushed out enough. And the Phragmites is overtaking that area too. So I hope that the town, if and when they buy this, they do have a management plan that allows those, whether they put a culvert in the way they do over at Hook Pond, to allow the tide to come in and out, or even once a year, perhaps use a backhoe and keep that flowing at least a little bit, not for big boats, but enough to flush out those ponds, because they're actually probably dangerous in terms of health. And then my wife will read this positional statement. Now, we're in favor of allowing the public to come onto that property and walk onto that property, but we're not in favor of a designated trail. The reason is that designated trails bring in more people, and they bring in congestion for parking. Now, this road, Mile Hill Road, it terminates, at the end of Phoebe Scoy's estate. She had 90 acres. We had the back 40. The Camp St. Regis, Kathy Kennedy is here. Her family owned Camp St. Regis, had the front 50. But it's a dead-end street, and it gets overcrowded all the time now. I don't even go to the beach now because there's too many cars and you can't park around, and we only live a quarter mile up from the beach. So I think that I think the best plan, in my opinion, would be to keep that gate closed the way it is right now, allow people to walk through it, but not to make a designated trail. There's a trail up the road. People could get, only about 100 yards up the road, 50 yards up the road is a trail. But I think if it was left the way it is, I think it'd be a passive reserve the way it should be. It wouldn't turn into a parking lot. It would stay pretty much the same. And I don't think the town wants people coming into a pond area where there could be, health issues, intermittent health issues, and not needless to say, parking in that area would make Mile Hill Road ridiculously crowded. It's already overcrowded right now. So I hope that the town's going to just buy it and keep it the way it is and manage the ponds appropriately. Thanks a lot for this, and I'll leave these, if I may, with the clerk, the positional statements, and my wife is going to read it into the record.
Thanks. Sorry. Actually, what I forgot to do, I jumped ahead of myself. You had an introduction, right, for this?
I did.
Property.
I think that was way more history than I was going to provide for you, though. I can give you the short version.
Why don't you do a short version so that folks at home too can see where the property is?
Give you the short version then. Here, I'll even put the aerial back up.
Thanks, Scott.
I also want to show you what he was talking about. So why don't I do this aerial instead?
Great.
This is what it looked like in 1962. The parcel that's outlined in blue, you can see all the vector control ditches and how much wetlands were there. And this portion, how many shovel scoopfuls he must have taken to get that there. But this is what it looked like in 1978 after the dredging. So a lot of those wetlands were filled in to create this compound with structures and so on. But fast forward to 2023, I'm just going to read you a short excerpt from our planning assessment that was actually done in 2011, but it's still pretty relevant. So even though the land has been disturbed by prior development and the soil type is categorized as fill land or dredge spoil, native species predominate, and the diverse habitat provides food and shelter for a wide variety of native wildlife. It is valuable upland that is surrounded by tidal wetlands, marshes, and beach. And as you can see on this current aerial, the county, state, and the town have all made considerable strides to protect this sensitive area in our town. Everything you see in green is protected. The property is within a scenic area of statewide significance, is within a critical lands protection strategy, a critical natural resources area, the harbor protection overlay district, a water protection district, and is part of a significant coastal fish and wildlife habitat. Long list. For these reasons, the parcels meet the criteria set forth in Town Law 64E. As such, I'd ask the board to pass a resolution to acquire this property.
Great, thank you, Scott. Okay, now, Gay, if you could come up and.
Thank you very much, Gay Campbell, Consulate.
We fully support the town of East Hampton's initiative to acquire 43 Mile Hill Road property, also known as High Barbary Marina, a 9.6 acre parcel of significant ecological value. This land, which includes part of Barnes Meadow and extends along Northwest Harbor, is part of New York's best preserved bay, surrounded by protected areas owned by the state, county, and town. Recognizing the environmental sensitivity of this area, we advocate special measures to ensure its protection and preservation. The purchase of High Barbary Marina will be funded by the town's Community Preservation Fund. According to Rule 9 of the 2022 Management and Stewardship Plan, public access to the purchased land may be restricted when it poses a risk to the property or its natural resources. Importantly, a scenic and conservation easement accepted by the town on December 4th, 2024, authorizes the implementation of a management plan that prohibits public access. Opening the area to the public without restrictions leads to littering, unauthorized parking, camping, beach parties, kayak storage, and erosion. Allowing cars would exacerbate noise pollution, dust, and debris. Pre-designated trails attract more visitors, resulting in increased traffic, parking issues, and land degradation. The area near the foot of Mile Hill Road already suffers from parking and congestion. A trail system on 43 Mile Hill Road that is accessible from Mile Hill Road and from Northwest Landing Road would negatively impact the nearby communities. While we do not oppose public access to the property, we urge the town to prohibit defined trails on the property. We recommend public access be restricted as follows. No motor-driven vehicles should be allowed to access the property, maintaining the current locked gate to prevent car entry. Access to the property should be limited to foot traffic only. In accordance with the existing conservation easement and with Rule 9, control public access to maintain the natural and scenic state and present character of the land. A management plan should prohibit the establishment of public trails to prevent environmental degradation. The marina basins, now referred to as ponds, risk becoming impaired due to algae blooms and pollution from potential water flow from Suffolk County vector control mosquito ditches. The isolation from the bay could threaten the aquatic ecosystem and human health, as has occurred at Wainscott Pond. We recommend a management plan to monitor the health of the ponds. We suggest a culvert be installed like the culvert installed at Hook Pond to allow seawater to flow in and out with the tide, or at least flush out the basins by periodically reopening with a backhoe the historical inlet to the bay. In summary, we advocate for limited public access, vigilant water body management, and a prohibition of trail development to preserve the ecological integrity of High Barbary Marina. Sincerely, Larry and Gay.
Thank you, Gay.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Rick Whalen. Welcome back, Rick.
Good evening again, Madam Chairwoman. I'm a supervisor, members of the town board. Richard Whalen, speaking here as a private citizen. I'm in favor of this acquisition. Obviously, Larry Consley, having lived nearby, knows the history of the actual parcel better than I do, but it was the High Barbary Marina. It was owned by Ernest Comiathi and closed down around 1985. That's when it ended. So there was, and Scott, of course, showed you on the aerials, it was actually a boat basin, and it has closed down, and that's why you have what appears to be a man-made pond. This is part of an area known historically as Barnes Meadow. That tidal marsh, which is still a very, very high quality salt meadow, was Barnes Meadow. It's mostly, all of that land is now preserved, the adjacent land, the meadow itself. There are about 55 acres of land that are preserved there. Most of it's owned by the New York State DEC, although most of that land was actually preserved by the planning board in the subdivision. To the south of it, and also contiguous, is Northwest Swamp, where the town owns 11 acres. So 11 acres and 55 acres, that's a 66-acre contiguous preserved area. If you acquire this land, which is 9 acres, that brings the total up to 75 acres. And I'm a big believer in building on what you have. So this was originally part of Barnes Meadow. As Scott indicated, it was filled, then the boat basin was dredged out. So obviously it's a very worthwhile acquisition for the town. I will mention a bit of historical trivia. So just to the northeast of this property is 2 acres of town land at the end of Mile Hill Road. So actually when you make that contiguous, you'll have a 77-acre preserve. So as far as I can tell, that 2 acres on Mile Hill Road is the first land the town of East Hampton ever purchased for open space, 1956. Just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. John?
John V.H. Halsey, president of the Peconic Land Trust. Since I am so seldom here for things like this, and since it's another conservation project following ours, I wanted to stay and I wanted to voice our support, the Peconic Land Trust, of this acquisition. And it's never a zero-sum game. There's lots of land that needs to be protected, and we are so fortunate to have the CPF to do it through 2050 right now. So let's not be bashful about spending the money to protect what is important. I will say, just hearing the conversation, that public access must not undermine the conservation values for the purposes for protecting the land. So, obviously, you're going to need to do a appropriate management plan, just as we will on the property that we own. Hopefully, we'll go forward to protect with you. It's just important that the conservation values, whether it's the water quality or it's the ecological integrity of nature that's there, you have to tailor the public access to what you're trying to protect. So go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Brian Domain? Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor, members of the board. I'm Brian Dumaine. I live at 39 Mile Hill Road, which is contiguous to 43 Mile Hill Road. I'm here to support every point that Larry and Gay made about the land. It's one of the most pristine parts of the town, and I think one of the most beautiful parts of the town. And what you're doing is in purchasing this land, if you decide to do so, is putting a final piece of a puzzle into an amazing area of the town. If you think about it, Mr. Whalen talked about Barnes Meadow. My house looks out on Barnes Meadow, and it's incredible. I mean, the snowy white egrets, the blue herons, the bald eagles, you name it. But that's just a small part of the picture. If you look at the whole area, you start at Barcelona Neck, right? That's preserved. And then you come to the county and Northwest Creek, where I keep my little sailboat. That's preserved. And then we have Barnes. And then we have the Grace Estate. And then we have Cedar Neck Park. And if you stretch your imagination a little bit and you look across the bay, you've got Mashomick. And you look across and all you see are trees. There are no mega mansions there. It's just nature. So I think it's an amazing thing that you're doing if you do purchase this land. Now, I want to make one point to support Larry's point about a trail. First of all, it's kind of a silly place for a trail. I don't know if any of you have visited the land in question, but you walk down a little driveway and there's a clearing where the people were going to build their house, 10,000 square foot house. And then to the right is the marina, or what was the marina, which is actually, I mean, my grandkids go down there and they watch the great blue herons there and the ducks when they're migrating. You can see it from the beach. You don't need access from the land to see it. You can walk through a little path on Mile Hill Beach, and you can hide yourself in the foot of this trail where the birds don't see you, and you can spot all the birds. And you don't spook them. But if you had people on the land walking up to the water, you're going to spook the birds. But there's not a lot of space to walk. I mean, it'd be silly having like trail markers because you can sort of see where you are at any time. So I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to have a trail there. And the other reason you don't want a trail is that, you know, people will stop and they'll picnic, and then, you know, there'll be garbage left behind. And as we know, you know, we have all these plastics in our food chain now, and they, you know, or we have plastic six-pack holders, and birds get caught in them. And when we walk on the beach every day there, we always pick up a handful of little plastic pieces, right, that people have left who are using the beach. And we let people use the beach, great, it's fine. But, you know, it's just adding to what's one of the most sensitive areas in the region. So in summary, I fully support what you're doing, and thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Would anyone else? That's all that signed up. Is there anyone? Yes, please.
To Ember Davis.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor and Town Board. I'm not familiar with talking before you, but I live at...
you could state your name for the...
Oh, my name is Janet Schneider. I live at 66 Northwest Landing Road. It's quite nearby to the subject property. I'm speaking in favor of the town's acquisition. It's a very, very unique parcel. Very diverse wetlands. I'm an artist, but I also am an avid birder. And I would say I visited that site thousands of times over the last 40 years. I have to say there's been a marked degradation of the quality of the water in the last 2.5 to 3 years. There are many fewer birds. There are very unusual species you see there, including like the belted kingfisher, you know, which is a bird that is very fussy about water quality and where it will fish. I haven't seen one in the last 2 years. There also is a small group of glossy ibis that come in there, which is another species you don't commonly see, amongst all the other great white heron, great blue heron that are more common, snowy egrets that you see. The channel, man-made, spade-made, or however it was made, has become really closed. I'd say the last 18 months, it's almost totally closed. The water comes in underneath the reeds. There's no open channel there anymore. And so the two, if you could call them ponds or residual marina site, have become incredibly stagnant. And I think it works against the beauty of the preserve. So I would advocate for the town to acquire it. It's still incredibly unique and beautiful place, but I'm also advocating for some kind of water management program to go with. And thank you for allowing me to put my 2 cents in.
Thank you, Jen. David, did you want to address the board on this topic? Welcome back, David.
Again, David Buda from the Springs. I am in support of this acquisition. I understand that the landowner, the grandson of this the Menol, has done everything he has to do to get the approvals necessary to build. So he's done his homework, he's gotten his approvals, he's ready to rock and roll. So it's all that more important for the town to consider the acquisition. However, I look forward to the day when, after a lot of review and consideration, a detailed management plan is adopted, because public access, public use of publicly acquired lands is the linchpin of the CPF, to the extent that it does not harm the environment. And I appreciate there are limits to public access and public use. And Scott, and I don't know if this property will be added to the nature preserve or not, but I look forward to the fact that I am confident that they will develop an appropriate management plan that provides the maximum reasonable public access and use of the property. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Yes, please. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Cindy Shea, and I thank the board for having this hearing tonight. I am an associate broker with Sotheby's International Realty, and I am a homeowner in the Northwest Woods of nearly 40 years, and I live about 1.5 miles from this property. For going on 2 years, I've been helping the owner of this property assess the property, and he can't be here tonight. So on his behalf, I'd like to tell you that he's very grateful that you are holding this hearing, and he sincerely hopes that, you know, this piece of property will be preserved. Speaking personally, I have spent so much time down in that area, on that beach. My children, from the time they were little, were digging sand crabs, and we swim there. And I always thought that that was just all public land, state, county, town. So I was shocked to hear it wasn't. So I'm thrilled to be here tonight, and I sincerely hope that you'll purchase the land. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy. Would anyone else like to address the board? Matthew, is there anyone on the line?
We have no callers on the line.
Motion to close?
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, so now we're moving on to the third public hearing. Cheryl, if you could read that meeting notice, please. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Notice is hereby given that the Town Board of the Town of East Hampton will hold a public hearing at Town Hall, 159 Panagle Road, East Hampton, New York, on Thursday, July 3rd, 2025 at 6. As soon thereafter as the matter may be heard, to consider comments of all people with regard to the amendment of Chapter 255 zoning of the East Hampton Town Code in order to amend Chapter 255-1-41E. Personal wireless facilities, Tier 1. A local law amending Chapter 255 zoning, Section 255-1-41E, Tier 1, Town, Street, Rights of Way. 255-1-41E, Tiered Permit Process. The Town of East Hampton Department of Planning shall receive all personal wireless service facility siting applications and assign each application to one of the following tiers. These tiers represent a ranking for the preferred design of future personal wireless service facilities, with Tier 1 applications being the most preferred and Tier 3 applications being the least preferred. Where an applicant proposes a new Tier 3 personal service facility, each applicant shall demonstrate why adequate coverage in the approximately of the site by either a Tier 1 or by a Tier 2 facilities cannot be provided. Tier 1, Town Street Rights of Way. Small wireless service facilities on existing poles inside Town Street Rights of Way. Small wireless service facilities on new or replacement poles inside Town Street Rights of Way.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Is there anyone that wants to address the board on this public hearing? Matthew, is there anyone on the line?
We have no callers on the line.
Motion to close?
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Cheryl, if you could read the fourth meeting notice, please.
Notice hereby given that the Town Board of the Town of East Hampton will hold a public hearing at Town Hall, 159 Panagle Road, East Hampton, New York, or as otherwise set forth herein on Thursday, July 3rd, 2025, 6 p.m., or as soon thereafter as this matter may be heard, for the purpose of considering a proposed contract with the Village of East Hampton for fire protection and emergency ambulance service to be furnished by the village on behalf of the Fire Protection District known as Northwest Fire Protection District and the Town of East Hampton Water Supply and Fire District for the calendar years 2026 and 2027 upon the following general terms. 1, the fire department shall answer and attend all calls in said fire district and shall furnish firefighting vehicles and equipment and firefighting personnel. 2, the fire department shall furnish emergency ambulance service, including vehicles and equipment and ambulance personnel to the district. 3, for the services during the 12-month period of 2026, the Town of East Hampton shall pay the sum of $3,877,196.04. For such period of 2027, the town of East Hampton shall pay a sum of $3,993,511.93.
Thank you, Cheryl. Would anyone like to address the board on this matter? David?
Yes.
David, you're behind the screen, so it's harder for me to see now.
Good evening. I don't live within the Northwest Fire Protection District, but if I did, I would be very, very concerned about the tax impact of this resolution. As a licensed tax grievance consultant, I study the tax rates, and what I've noticed is that the tax rates for the Northwest Fire Protection District have just ballooned. Since 2022, the expenditure by the town was about 1.8 million, and then it reached 2.3 million the following year, then 2.4 million, another almost 2.5 million. We're going, and I thought maybe I had this wrong. We're going from 2.5 million to 3.8 million and then 3.9 million. What is going on? Where is the money going? Why is the expenditure so great? The tax rate for the Northwest Fire Protection District has zoomed from 2022, when it was $52 per 1,000 assessed value, up to $72.6 per 1,000 assessed value in 3 years. How much is it going to be in the next 2 years based on these numbers? Now, I appreciate that what has perhaps driven this was the creation of that Northwest Fire building at Northwest, at the end of Cedar Drive, which to me I always see it as a Potemkin village because I never see any activity there, and I don't really know what goes on there. And I know that the village had to buy a lot of equipment in order to fill that building, and the whole rationale for creating that building was to try to save residents of the Northwest Fire District money on their insurance by getting a fire station within 5 miles of their homes. But they may have saved money on their insurance, but they're paying literally through the nose for the fire protection service. So I know that this is a complicated process of negotiation between the town and the village. We don't have town doesn't have fire departments. We have fire districts, and then we have fire protection districts where we have to contract with a fire department in order to provide services. The village is required to have a fire department. They have a very big fire department. They're able to do the job. But it really needs to be an explanation of why it is so damn expensive and going up, and up with beyond a rational, obvious reason for it. So that's my comment.
Thank you, David. Matthew, is there anyone on the line?
We have no callers on the line.
Should we close?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're up to the 5th meeting notice, Cheryl.
Take notice that the town board of the town of East Hampton will hold a public hearing pursuant to Chapter 232 Urban Renewal of the Town Code of the town of East Hampton, Section 232-1-70, modification of the urban renewal plans in the Town Hall Meeting Room, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, New York, 11937, on July 3rd, 2025 at 6 p.m. or as soon thereafter as this matter may be heard, to consider the following modification of urban renewal map EH-17. Urban renewal map EH-17 from URP number 4, consisting of lot 17-23, inclusive as shown on file map number 501. URP number 6, consisting of lots 1 to 11, inclusively as shown as file map number 501. 2, URP number 4, consisting of lots 1, 2, and 17 to 23, inclusive of shown on file map number 501. URP number 6, consisting of lots 3 through 11, inclusive, and part of Underwood Avenue as abandoned, with said lot taking access to Royal Street using the 15-foot wide access strip shown on field map number 501. Exception as amended above, the requirements of the UR map EH-17 shall remain in full force and effect. A copy of a map depicting the proposed change is available in the office of the town clerk during regular business hours of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday, inclusive of holidays. A copy of the proposed changes may also be viewed on the site.
Thank you, Cheryl. So everyone's left the main meeting room here. So Matthew, is there anyone on the line?
The lines are quiet.
Motion to close.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, Cheryl, the 6th meeting notice, please?
Take notice that the Town Board of the Town of East Hampton will hold a public hearing pursuant to Chapter 232, Urban Renewal of the Town Code of the Town of East Hampton, Section 232-1-70, modification of the urban renewal plans in the Town Hall Meeting Room, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, New York, 11937, on July 3rd, 2025, at 6 p.m., or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard, to consider the following modifications of Urban Renewal Map SP-1-1, Urban Renewal Map number 161 in SP-4-2. Move the driveway access from the parcel of Harbor Boulevard to Park Street, with the said driveway being no closer than 50 feet from the eastbound travel lane of Harbor Boulevard. Except as amended above, the requirements of the UR map SP-4-2 shall remain in full force and effect. A copy of the map depicting the proposed change is available in the office of the town clerk during regular business hours of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, exclusive of holidays. A copy of the proposed changes may also be available at the town's website.
Thank you, Cheryl. Matthew, anyone on the line?
No callers on the line.
Motion to close.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
The 7th meeting notice, please?
Take notice that the Town Board of the Town of East Hampton will hold a public hearing pursuant to Chapter 232, Urban Renewal of the Town Code of the Town of East Hampton, Section 232-1-70, modification of the urban renewal plans in the Town Hall Meeting Room, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, New York, 11937, on July 3rd, 2025, at 6 p.m., or as soon thereafter as this matter may be heard, to consider the following modifications of Urban Renewal Map SP-2-2. Urban Renewal Map numbers 99E and SP-2-2 from portion of the 19th Street Road right-of-way immediately adjacent to Lot 46 to serve as a driveway access to the vehicle access point being at the easterly portion of Lot 46. 2, portion of 19th Street Road right-of-way immediately adjacent to Lot 46 to be abandoned, with the vehicle access point being at the northeast corner of the parcel of 19th Street. Urban Renewal Map numbers 110 in SP-2-2 from portion of the 19th Street Road right-of-way immediately adjacent to Lot 1 to serve a driveway access, with a vehicle access point being on the northerly portion of Lot 1. 2, portion of the 19th Street Road right-of-way immediately adjacent to Lot 1 to be abandoned, with the vehicle access point being on the northwest corner of the parcel at 19th Street. Except as amended above, the requirements of the UR map SP-2 shall remain in full force and effect. A copy of the map depicting the proposed change is available in the office of the town clerk during regular business hours of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday, exclusive of holidays. A copy of the proposed changes will also be available at the town's website.
Thank you, Cheryl. Matthew, anyone?
No callers.
Motion to close.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the last and final meeting notice, please, Cheryl.
Take notice that the Town Board of the Town of East Hampton will hold a public hearing pursuant to Chapter 232, Urban Renewal of the Town Code of the Town of East Hampton, Section 232-1-70, modification of the urban renewal plans in the Town Hall Meeting Room, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, New York, 11937, on July 3rd, 2025, at 6 p.m., or as soon thereafter as this matter may be heard, to consider the following modifications of Urban Renewal Map SP-1-1. Urban Harbor Renewal Map Number 97 in SP-1-1. Move the driveway access to the parcel of Harbor Boulevard to Park Street, with said driveway being no closer than 50 feet from the intersection of Eclair Street and Corbin Avenue. Except as amended above, the requirements of the UR Map SP-1-1 shall remain in full force and effect. A copy of a map depicting the proposed change is available in the office of the town clerk during regular business hours of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, exclusive of holidays. A copy of the proposed changes will also be available at the town's website.
Thank you, Cheryl. Matthew?
We have no
Anyone?
callers.
Motion to close.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We've got some weather moving in here, folks. Okay, so public portion. There's nobody in the main meeting room. Matthew, just confirming there's no one on the line.
No one is on the line.
All right, Tom, if you could start us off with resolutions, please.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. First resolution is 2025-930. This is approval of claims on warrant number 7A in the amount of $2,107,264 and in the amount of $45,679.47.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
931, this is a bond to amend the Amagansett Lighting District bond. This is to increase the total bond to the amount of $95,600 to encompass design and engineering plans for the Amagansett Lighting District.
Second.
Can we have a roll call, please, Cheryl?
Correct.
Yes. Councilmember Flake?
Aye.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers?
Aye.
Councilmember Fogley-Pima?
Aye.
Supervisor Brooker? Aye.
Resolution 2025-932 is to extend contract EH 23024. This is for Fort Hill Cemetery interments and maintenance contract for Peter Joyce, Seaside Landscaping and Pools.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
2025-933 is to accept an OpenGov change order for additional software services for 2025 for the additional cost of $3,870.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
934 is to accept bid EH 25029 for the supply and delivery of food items for July 2025, with the contract being awarded to Milliver Foods of New York, Inc.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
935 is to accept bid EH 25030. This is a trommel for the sanitation department, with the bid awarded to Emerald Equipment Systems in the amount of $344,680.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I'm happy to offer resolution 2025-936. This is the point student intern 1 in the aquaculture department for Layla Healy, hourly rate of $18 per hour, effective July 7th, 2025.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. 937 is a notice of bidders for EH 25-032. This is the IA system installation for 20 Dorset Road. The bid is available July 3rd, 2025. The bid is due back July 31st, 2025. Please contact the purchasing department of East Hampton 324-4183 if you have any other questions.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. 938 is extend contract EH/SAG 24-902 for HVAC repairs, service and installation to Best Climate Control Corporation through July 31st, 2026.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. 939 is authorized payment of prior year invoices for the Highway Department to T&B Auto Service in the amount of $74.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. 940 is a budget modification for the Superintendent of the Highway for the A Fund, where we're decreasing the amount for contingency in the amount of $8,825, and we're increasing subcontract expense in the amount of $8,825.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. 941 is a budget modification for aquaculture for propane costs in the amount decreasing the line for travel conference dues in the amount of $250 and increasing the amount of heat, budget line for heat in the amount of $250.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. 942 is a budget modification for the Parks Department, where we're decreasing health insurance line for $9,000 and increasing the line for general repairs in the same amount.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. 943 is a budget modification for the Montauk Playhouse. We're decreasing the line for contingency in the amount of $2,700, and we're budget line for the increase in budget for furniture and fixtures in the amount of $2,700.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 944 is a budget modification of the Planning Department, decreasing outside professional in the amount of $15,000 and increasing outside professional in the amount of $15,000.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 945 is to increase cap for engineering services, and this is for the engineering services of Vincent Gordiello and the Rayner Group to renew drainage plans, whereas said services were not to exceed $25,000. The town board directs the budget office to increase the cap for services to not to exceed $40,000.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 946 is the approval of various special events for June and July. The first one is Surf Lodge, and it's the Montauk School Jazz Band event at Surf Lodge, retroactive including Saturday, 6/28, 4 to 6 p.m. Takedown will be 7/8 at 5 p.m. Surf Lodge, the next one is also Surf Lodge for the Sloan Kettering event. Also takes place at Surf Lodge on Saturday, 7/5, 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. Next one is Project Most I Grow Summer Camp Swim Beach Schedule. This will take place at Maidstone Park Beach, retroactive, and to and including Mondays from 6/30/2025 through 8/20/2025. Next one is Project Most I Grow Summer Camp Swims Beach Schedule at Albert's Landing, Amagansett, retroactive to and including Tuesdays, 7/1 to 8/19, and Thursdays, 7/3 to 8/21. Next is Leo Dawn Chamber of Commerce, 4th of July Grucci Fireworks at Umbrella Beach, Montauk, Friday, July 4th, 9 p.m. to 9:30. Rain date is July 6th at the same time. Next is Devon Yacht Club, annual 4th of July celebration and fireworks show at the Devon Yacht Club, Landing Road in Amagansett on Saturday, July 5th, 5:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Their rain date is also July 6th at the same time. Next is Bob Miller for surf therapy, walk on water surf therapy, Ditch Plains Beach on July 8th through 8/21, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 a.m. to noon. Next is Montauk Historic Society Annual Craft Fair at Second House, and this will take place Saturday, July 12th, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., Sunday, July 13th, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Next is Longhouse Reserve Longhouse Summer Benefit Luminosity. This takes place on Saturday, July 12th, 5:45 to 11 p.m. Next is the Clearwater Beach Association Annual Beach Party for membership. This will take place on Saturday, July 12th, 4 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Next is Montauk Point Lighthouse Kevin Hart Comedy Show at the Lighthouse, 7/12/2025, 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And finally, Chamber of Commerce, Montauk Chamber of Commerce Concerts on the Green. These take place on Mondays from July 14th through August 25th, 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Next, I have 947, which is also an approval of various special events for July. The first is Duck Creek, the Art Center at Duck Creek Family Gathering Series, free art activity. This will take place every Monday from July 7th to August 25th from 5 to 7 p.m. Next is Concerned Citizens of Montauk, 27th Annual Rel Sun Surf Contest. This takes place July 19th at 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Their rain date is July 20th, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Next is the Wounded Warrior Project, Soldier Ride in the Hamptons, Wounded Warrior Project Bike Ride, the route starting at Amagansett Firehouse through various roads to Sag Harbor's Marine Park and return to Amagansett Fire Station. This will take place on Saturday, July 19th, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Next is Hampton Lifeguard Association, Hampton Volleyball by Kerry Walsh Jennings. This takes place at Kirk Park Beach in Montauk, Tuesday, July 22nd, 9 to 7. The rain date is Wednesday, July 23rd, 9 to 7. Lastly, Ross School Yacht Rock Review at Ross School at the athletic fields at the school, Saturday, July 26, 4 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 948 is approval for reimbursement of special event Montauk Music Festival cleanup deposit, and this is in the amount of $750.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 949, this is a notice of public hearing to amend Town Code Chapter 185-4, exceptions to Chapter 185-3, noise standards. A public hearing will be held on August 7th, 2025 at 6 p.m.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 950, this is a retained consultant, Justin Hornung. Justin Hornung shall be paid a rate of $50 per, this is for the town's affordable housing home ownership program to evaluate applicants, and he will be paid an amount of $50 per application, an amount not to exceed $10,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have Resolution 2025-951. It's a bond for $1.5 million for improvements to the town's dispatch center. I discussed this in my liaison report on Tuesday. The period of probable usefulness is 15 years.
Second.
Could we get a roll call, please? 951.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Resolution 952 is a list appointment for John Lowe to police officer in the police academy. John Lowe is hereby appointed to the position of police officer to the police academy at the annual salary of $66,548.67 effective July 7th, 2025. He will then be placed on an unpaid leave of absence beginning July 7th until the start of the Suffolk County Police Department Police Academy at a date to be determined.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
953 is a list appointment for Christopher Kramer to the police officer in the East Hampton Town Police Department at the annual salary of $66,548.67 effective July 13th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
954 is to authorize school resource officer training in the police department. This is for Michael Rodriguez. The financial impact is $2,500.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
955 is a payout upon retirement for James Bennett. James Bennett has retired from his position of Waterways Maintenance Mechanic 3 with the East Hampton Town Police Department Division of Marine Patrol effective May 7, 2025, after 27 years of service. Audited time records indicate that he has accrued vacation time, sick personal time, compensatory time, and so he'll have a gross total payout of $29,254.46. We just want to wish Jim much good health and happiness in his retirement because he didn't want to party and he wanted to go out quietly.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
956 is a release of a performance bond for South Fork Wind LLC. The town of East Hampton accepted a $1.5 million performance bond and security from South Fork Wind LLC to assure restoration of the easement and temporary installation easement areas to their pre-easement conditions following the installation of the wind farm cable. The Town Highway Department has reviewed the restoration work and authorized the immediate release of $1 million of the performance bond and security.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
957 is to renew Alera Group CPI Benefits Advisors. This is for Affordable Care Act compliance at a cost not to exceed $19,500.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
958 is a reimbursement for personal property damage, and this is to a car that was hit in the town hall parking lot, and the reimbursement goes to Neji Valera and Jose Dos Santos for out-of-pocket expenses for vehicle repairs in the amount of $8,824.27.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
959 is to authorize the use of the town credit card for police department training, and this is for police officer Michael Rodriguez at a cost not to exceed $900.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
960 is to increase the cap for outside counsel for Regano LLC with regard to airport matters for 2025 in an amount not to exceed $150,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
961 is to extend contract EH24-024. This is for HVAC repairs, service, and installation for the communication towers, and that's with Best Climate Control Corporation. And this is effective August 5th through August 4th, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
962 is to extend contract EH24-020. This is for the supply and delivery of auto parts for 2024. Advanced Stores Company doing business as Advanced Auto Parts, Grade A Petroleum, Fleet Pride, Inc., and Morgan Auto Supply.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Kate?
I don't have it. Here we go. This is Resolution 964.
963.
I'm sorry, 963. This is a budget modification in the Building Department. This is decreasing $25,000 from full-time salaries and increasing outside professional in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 964 is to accept proposal from H2M Architects and Engineers, Professional Counseling Service, Interim Plan Review, and Zoning Compliance Services. The town board received a proposal from HM2 Architects and Engineers for the above-mentioned services for various residential and commercial type construction projects located in the town of East Hampton. Resolved that the town board hereby retains H2M Architects and Engineers upon the terms and conditions noted below, fully set forth in their individual proposal dated June 18th, 2025. Resolved that the town supervisors authorized and directed to enter into agreement with H2M Architects and Engineers for the provision of services.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, does anybody have anything they need to bring up?
No.
All right, so do I have a motion to close?
Motion to close.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We wish everyone a happy and safe 4th of July.
All right.
Thank you,
Happy
Matthew.
4th, all. Enjoy the weekend.